Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Bruce McKellar. I work with MSU Extension down in the southwest part of the state. And this morning we're going to have a little bit different schedule than what we originally had planned for. Chris DeFonso was graciously allowed us to be able to change around our schedule a little bit so that we could bring you a presentation from Roger Betz, who is our district farm management educator, to talk a little bit about crop insurance, and more specifically, due to the rain that we've had this spring, going into early summer, I guess now, is that what maybe when we should be considering, or things to consider between taking prevented planting versus going with a regular, trying to plant late. So Roger, are you ready to take it away?
Okay, very good. Welcome, everybody. From the perfect year, from extremely wet to here comes the drought in July and August. So who knows? Tough year, no question about it. I've done some work. I want to thank Elliot Alfredson is my crop insurance agent. I farm a little bit, some of you know. And so I've kind of got some examples for myself here. There's a fast tool at the University of Illinois called FastDocs. Anybody can download this. You run on an Excel spreadsheet. It's a calculator to help us look at the preventive planning comparison and so forth. It's a partial budget question. What's the expected revenues? What's the expected expenses and so forth? And so first I'd like to go through and explain using the FAST tool how the calculations work for preventive planning. And so you say you've got a revenue protection program, an 80% policy, and say your APH trying to adjust whatever is 160 on corn and 50 bushels on soybeans. The price is the spring price. You do not get to use the harvest option with preventive planning. And so the price will be $4, which is the spring price for your crop insurance on corn, and $9.54 on soys. And then you use a preventive planning factor. And there's some options here. The default is 55% on corn, 60% on soybeans, but a lot of producers may have bought up. It's a fairly cheap policy that you can increase the corn to 60%, increase your soybeans to 65% as far as a prevent planning factor to calculate through. And so this, I tried to show the final planting date in Michigan. Make sure you're looking at Michigan versus Ohio versus Indiana and other states as far as these final planting dates. June 5th is the first final planting date for corn. And for soybeans, it's June 15th. And then from that point forward, we lose a little bit each day, 1% coverage. The preventive planning payment in this example is $282 on corn and $229 on soybeans. Notice the corn value is higher by about $55 or so, $55 higher than what soybeans are. So your corn preventive planning acres, for the most part, are going to be more valuable than what your soybean preventive planting acres. So you go through and look at what other costs you might have. And one idea on weed control costs is maybe we do a cover crop. Can fit in pretty nicely with this. There's some rules on when you can plant or when you can harvest the cover crops and so forth. But there are some opportunities for that. You got your insurance program in there at the $18 and $15 the cost, and that returns from the insurance is a $239 and the $189 in comparison to our Challenger, which would be the to go ahead and plant. So you look at the planting date, say you plant on 6/10, and for corn, that late, that's about 15 days from now. I'm sorry, about 10 days from now. And soybeans on the 20th, which would be 20 days from now. And so your insurance guarantee is reduced a little bit. It goes down 1% per day after that 6/5. So on June 10th, that's 5 days, and so that insurance guarantee is going to be reduced by 5%. I go through and look at some guesstimate and what kind of yield we're going to have. You talk to all the agronomists and so forth. We got lots of them online here. There's more to yield than just simply the planting date. There's lots of other weather considerations and so forth, what Jeff talked about, what kind of weather we're going to have. Worst thing you can do, of course, everybody knows this, I think, if you plant it wet and then it turns off dry, those crops just don't grow very well, as we all know. There's lots of other factors, what the rain patterns are, what the heat units are, those kinds of things, the variety, those kinds of things. So if corn, you end up with, say, a 65% yield, would be 117 bushels on corn, 43 bushels on soybeans. Suppose the harvest price ends up being, that's a futures harvest price used for crop insurance calculations. Say that's 4.25 and maybe up $10 on beans. Take away a basis from it, so your cash price is $4 on corn, $9.50 on soys. Crop revenue, $468 and $413. Notice that there's a crop insurance payment. Even though the revenue guarantee, it dropped a little bit, and the revenue from the crop here is at $468, there is still a crop insurance payment that does come in. Notice that the crop insurance number that's used is the $4.25, because that's the harvest price. For the cash price that you got was the $4 price. So that's why you look at this and see the difference here. But the crop insurance would be calculated at 4.25, because that's what the futures price is. For futures, that's what's used to calculate the crop insurance. So that's why there's a $20 payment on the crop insurance. Even though it's planted late, you still would have the crop insurance. It's just the level is reduced a little bit, 1% per day, as we go through that late planting window. Okay, another consideration is the market facilitation payment. I've got that in $1, just to mention it. We don't know for sure whether that has to be planted. There's talk about the original one that has to be planted acres in order to qualify for that payment. We don't know how much that payment is going to be. It's not going to be weighted heavily on soybeans like it was before. It's going to be weighted heavily on the county revenue amount, and it's based on your planted acres of all crops, a long list of crops, not just corn, not just soybeans, as the first market facilitation program was. So revenue, $489 on corn and $414 on soys. You go in and look at the direct cost of additional costs. You got to think about this, not as your total cost of production, but what cost are you going to incur from this point forward. For example, on myself, I've already got my broadcast fertilizers on. The only thing I've got to put on is nitrogen and my planter fertilizers. Soybean fertilizers are all on. Not any more fertilizers put on, so my extra cost is actually zero. Some herbicides, pesticides, seed costs, different kinds of costs, machine hire, you can read the numbers. These are your pocket costs, not total costs. So think of it as a cash flow kind of a number. Notice depreciation, for example, is not in here because these need to be the variable cost. Here's costs yet to be incurred, $350 and $178. So expected net returns per acre, $139 on corn, $236 on soybeans. And so as you can see, we can go back a little bit on this. Looking at this planting date, it looks like if you're going to plant the soybeans with these prices and these yields, will be better in terms of what the expected returns would be. Almost $100 more from soybeans versus corn with those yield and price assumptions. This is a very nice chart that goes through and looks at varying yields and varying prices on crops. So this is looking at corn. And so here's what I have, 117 someplace in here with those calculations. And basically what this chart shows is with the harvest price, what the crop insurance is figured on, and your cash price that you receive, and you can see where the kind of the break even is. Numbers in red mean that the revenue are above net return for preventive planting. So preventive planting is a better option if we're down in the white area, where the red area, colored area with high prices and high yields, of course, it makes more sense to plant corn versus go with the preventive planting. I think it's important to kind of look at this in terms of these worst case scenarios. Remember that you're going to, the preventive planting, you're going to be at the what was the number, back up the top here, 239, sort of a net on corn, 189 on soys. So we go back to here, look at the 239 number, which is right in through here, and see where the break point is, preventive planting versus the go ahead and plant the crops and so forth. Notice that there's some differences here, but it's not an absolute. Anytime you get into the whites, you're going to be at this 239. And if we get into these 140 yields and 425 price for a cash price, 450 futures, we start to get a little bit better with the go ahead and plant the crop and those kinds of things versus go to prevent plant. It's important to use your own numbers, of course, in trying to go through and calculate these values and try to figure out what makes the most sense for your particular farm. We go down to the soybeans now, same kind of scenario, and looking at what kind of yields and what kind of prices and so forth from a matrix standpoint. We get into the $10 futures price, $9.70 price on soybeans. If it goes that high, you can see where the points start making some more sense to go ahead and plant the crop versus go with the preventive planting. This looks like an aberration. It's not. What this, of course, the dollars aren't that much difference here. And notice on soybeans, really there's not a huge amount of difference. 173 from here clear up to 203. Kind of looking across your 206. And the numbers are not as drastic as it is in corn in terms of the differences, whether you plant or don't plant. The difference here is the fact that crop insurance is starting to kick in. If you have a real low yield and you have a crop insurance, so that crop insurance kicks in, and crop insurance pays better at a $10 price versus a $9.70 price. That's why there's an advantage. But the crop insurance, if we get really low yields, because the crop insurance starts to kick in, if you plant the crop, even though it's a later planted date, and you still get some revenue, and that's why that's a little bit better. Not a lot, 191 versus 188, 186, but that's why that number shows there. It looks like a little bit goofy, but it's really not. I had to think about that for a while, why that actually works that way. Now let's talk about some prevent plant rules. First plant late date is after June 5th on corn, after June 15th on soybeans. The revenue guarantee is reduced 1% per day. It's not your yield directly, it's the revenue guarantee is reduced 1% per day. The last late plant dates for corn are 6/25, and soys is July 10th. And so this reduction is 20% from the 5th of June to the 25th of June on corn, and from the 15th to the 10th of July, or 25 days on soys, that we can have this 1% reduction per day. Here's some little rules. There's 72 hours report that I can't plant. That's to the crop insurance agent. That's after the 6/25 date or the 7/10 date. So we got lots of time to report that you can't plant, but there's a catch here. The FSA, you must report prevent plant to them by June 20th. So we got two different dates here. They're conflicting with each other in terms of when you must report when you're late on a prevent plant. So the answer is that's the FSA on the 20th. That's for corn. It's 15 days, and soybeans would be 15 days after the 15th, so be June 30th for FSA. And so you got kind of two rules. You go in and report, hey, I can't plant. You call them or send them a text or something, hey, I can't plant. And then when you do your final crop report, you have to say, well, I did get it planted. So that seems a little unusual or not unusual for the government and so forth, but just it's conflicting numbers and conflicting dates of when you got to do that. This is a catch. You have to have at least 20 acres or 20% of the insurable crop acreage in a unit, whichever's less. And so this can kind of catch you, because if you're going out there and you plant part of a field and you go back and plant a little bit more, and maybe you end up with 18 acres that you don't get planted out of 200 acres in that particular unit or your crop unit and so forth. And you're not going to be able to qualify on that 18 acres because it's not 20 acres. And so that 18 acres of no plants is going to be weighted in with your yields. And so you're only going to have 180 acres of planted crop, but that yield will be divided over 200 acres in my example because you don't have. So you want to make sure if you're going to go prevent plant, or think you're going to go prevent plant, is make sure you got at least 20 acres or 20% of that insurable unit. That can catch some people and surprised. The acreage that you can use. Okay, I'm going to plant everything in corn this year because corn pays better on crop insurance for the prevent plant. You got to have at least that many acres planted at least one time within the last 4 years of corn. There are some rules and guidelines if you picked up new farms. I learned that yesterday talking to my crop insurance agent at Alfredson. Some rules: no harvest option with preventive plan. In other words, the $4 on corn and the $9.54 on soys will be the price that's used for preventive planting. So you don't get that kick up at the end of the year if we have higher prices, what it looks like we might have right now. You can also lose your enterprise unit classification. That's a big deal to a lot of farmers. So you might, because the enterprise units is based on planted acres, and so say your crop insurance quotes and so forth are based upon an enterprise unit, and then you go and decide not to plant that one field, that may throw you out of your enterprise unit. Now you only got one township one section with corn in it versus two sections, and so now you're going to be kicked out of the enterprise unit, lower cost of insurance. So two sections, same county, and so forth, 20% and 18 acre examples, what I just went through. You must be planned to qualify for the enterprise unit. It's not just on what you intend to plant. SCO, the supplemental coverage option, which is a county based, and a lot of people did buy this year. It's a bonus on top of your regular crop insurance. Effectively, it's a 14% additional coverage based on a county average yield. It's void without being planted. So just because you have prevent plant, your SCO option is going to be kicked out, and that's a 14% loss of potential income protection on your crop insurance because of you didn't plant the crop. So keep that in mind in terms of additional protection with so many counties being planted late. If they do get planted, and then it does get planted late, well, then the average yield might be lower. But if, on the other hand, if we don't get any more corn planted, only the corn that is in the ground is what's counted for the yield, we could have phenomenal yields. And so it's a kind of a interesting situation. Market facilitation program 2, we don't know for sure what's going to happen with that, so I got some question marks behind that. Abandoned products. Those are products like insurance companies may have some special item that they've added on, and it's not RMA subsidized, USDA subsidized. Abandoned products is a term. Those are based on planted acres, and so if you don't have planted acres, you may not qualify for some of those quote-unquote abandoned products. Other factors to consider. Future APH yields. If you plant the crop, and that's going to be your yield, and if it's going to be like my 117 bushel corn in my example I had, I don't necessarily like to have that in my APH yield for the future and so forth. What's the risk? What's the reward? One point is there's always a lot of upside potential. If we do get high prices, if we do get good yields, we plan on the 10th of June with corn, and you still have, all the other growing conditions are really good for the year. You may, I emphasize, you may end up with pretty decent kinds of yields. There's lots of studies done in Indiana, Ohio about late planting dates, the average planting date and it's not really highly correlated with the actual yield for that state if there's some planting delays in the spring. Getting out, if your hedges to rise in pre-sold positions, I have more corn sold than what I've got planted right now, and so I backed out of some of those positions. You got some choices whether to roll forward or to eat it now. I decided to eat it now. I started to get where I was out of the money on some tools, and so I decided to roll out and get out of those things. That may or may not be a good decision, so now I'm speculating sort of true hedges. But if I don't plant the crop, then it can't deliver on the crop. And I don't plant as a crop insurance, so I'm going to be, if you plant for the high prices, that's increasing an awful lot of risk. So I got out of those positions. I didn't concern about I could actually deliver on those contracts. There's lots of other questions in terms of this whole preventive planting area. I'm just it's a different animal. You need to talk to your crop insurance agent to kind of understand the things. I've got irrigated corn and dryland corn both on in 3 different counties. I'm not that big a farmer. I just have a farm right in the corner. And so I've got different decisions, different percents. I've got anywhere from 50% policies up to 80% policies. So the 50% policies, there's not very much revenue protection offered with those things. The 80% policies are of course, a lot more revenue protection. So I've got lots of things to think about in terms of which acres to try to focus, try to get planted. Take home is not a simple answer. It depends. If can, I think you certainly want to try to plant corn up until June 5th. Plant soys till the June 15th, so we start getting into those reductions. Take preventive planting on the balance, maybe. Depends on what this weather is going to do, and so forth. I think you got to use good agronomic common sense on things, but yeah, we need to try to produce a crop if we can. Preventive planting on corn is more valuable than what it is on soybeans, and so you want to try to get as many preventive plant corn. So that kind of says there's some, even though you get later in the year, you're going to want to switch to soybeans, and where that's around the 10th of June, something like that. If you got a choice to plant corn or soys and you're worried about the yield on corn, you might go ahead and go to prevent plant on corn and then skip on and plant the soybeans versus the corn. Depending on additional cost, price projections, and projected yields, you'll want to switch from planting corn to soybeans, and that's the point I just tried to make. So that's what I got in terms of the presentation, the amount of time we got to talk about it. It's Innovation Day coming up on July 26th, which is in our slides. And there's a thank you for attending. And there's someplace there's a survey thing. So with that, Bruce, I'll turn it back over to you. Questions?
There was a comment in the chat that someone was looking for the web address for the app that was used.
Yeah, that's it. Farm Docs. I've got it up and running right now, actually. So it's right here. I still got my screen on. That's the tool.
University of Illinois Farm Docs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
So I guess that's kind of the way we've done it in the past, is to look at either the FAST tools from University of Illinois or to look at Farm Docs at University of Illinois, and that should be able to help you get to those. And you have several different subcategories under there, but crop insurance is one of those. Yeah,
there's several. It's a very good tool, and make sure you get into the Michigan part of it. And so the main menu is here, and here's a plan calculator, and you can pick your county, your state, and your county, and it'll figure out some numbers and plug in your values.
We will go ahead and call this closed. Thanks again to Roger for putting this together and on short notice, and we appreciate that. And good luck, everyone, in terms of trying to make those decisions. We know it's not an easy situation. Certainly, the southern tier of Michigan has been very wet the last few weeks, especially, and with more rain on the way today, it'll definitely push us in towards into that June 5th deadline for corn anyway. So people will be thinking about that for sure.
Remember, it's just a 1% drop per day after that. It's not a drop dead date. That June 5th.
Please do click on the link in the chat pod to fill out our evaluation for this program. Also, I just want to remind everyone, I want to thank Chris DeFonso, who was regularly scheduled to talk today and talking about early season insects. Chris is going to join us on August 1st to be able to provide us with an update on several things on insects that are pretty interesting. So I'm looking forward to that presentation as well.